I'm going to be bringing up Professor Elaine. Yes. All right. So Professor Elaine is an associate professor from the Boston School of Public Health, and she's a founding member of Boston University Faculty of Computing and Data Sciences. Anyone from the health sector here? Maybe you're studying pharmacy. Wow, interesting. Can we clap for them? For me, it's quite interesting to see people from that field, you know, coming up into AI, because for most times you see people in computer science, engineering, and the likes. But it's really, really amazing. So Dr. Elaine, she has led the Racial Data Tracker project at Boston University, and she has also served as program lead and a senior advisor for artificial intelligence and machine learning to advance health equity and researcher diversity. You know, our research and service has been recognized with awards. So, you know, it's such a privilege to, you know, to have her today, and she's going to be here live. How many of you are excited about that? She's not joining virtually, she's here live. She'll also be launching something very interesting, which I should be speaking to once she comes on board. So she has been recognized with awards, lots of awards, from Boston University School of Public Health, Mozilla and Boston Congress of Public Health. She is an advisory board of Data Science Nigeria and Data Scientists Network, and, you know, organizations that are working to build data science and capacity in Africa. And she likes to also mention that she was born and raised in Cameroon. Please, with a warm welcome, please. Come on, let's celebrate her. Yes, yes, please, you can stand. So such a privilege to have you, Dr. Elaine.
Good morning, everyone. So how many of you have written a research paper? How many have published a research paper? Okay, few people. So today I'll talk about how you go about writing and publishing a research paper. So we spent the last week recording videos on this subject specifically, and so at the end of it, at the end of this talk, we're going to have like an introduction to some of that work that we did this week. I'm going to talk to you about how to write and publish a scientific paper. So first of all, a little bit about RETHE. We launched RETHE in 2019 in Arusha, Tanzania with Dr. Dina Machove. And the goal of RETHE is to increase representation of Africans in scientific publications. Currently, we're working on relaunching RETHE, so RETHE 2.0. And the new format is going to focus on providing online content so that researchers can access those content. And then we will have workshops where researchers can come in and practice what they've learned online. So you get a chance to actually write a paper with the goal of publishing that paper. So instead of spending several days talking about how do you write a paper, we will spend those days working on your paper. We currently also have a fellowship that is open for women to apply to. So this is a Data Science to Advance Women's Health Fellowship, and it's focused specifically on women working on women's health issues, and this is broadly defined in West and Central Africa. So if you're a woman or if you know a woman, I know all of you know at least one woman, you should share this with them. They can apply. The applications are open until November 15th. One of the requirements is that you should be working on a paper. So the fellowship wants to help you take your research and publish it. And we're also going to provide data science training as well. So you can access that on the Data Science Africa website. So for this session, I'm going to talk about introduction to scientific research, tips for writing a good research paper, and how to write the introduction, methods, results, and discussion sections of your paper. So how do you come up with a research question? That's a question that I get all the time, especially for people who are getting into research for the first time. They want to know, how do I even come up with a question? So there are many ways that you can do this. The first is just to think about what you're interested in studying. What do you want to study specifically? and what has been done on the topic. So if you have a topic, what have other people studied in that area? What are the open questions in that particular space? So when you think about what you're interested in studying, one of the things that I like to think about is what keeps me up at night. So what are those things or those problems that make me very worried or very angry? And those are the things that I want to study, because what I found out is that when I work on things that I'm passionate about, I do well on those things than if I work on things that I'm not very passionate about. And what would you like to change in the world or in your community? What are some of the problems that you see around you that you would like to change? And what is impacting you, your family, your friends, the people you care about? And then you can also think about what others are studying. So do you have ideas on how to improve research that has already been done? So maybe there's a paper out there that you've read and you thought, well, the paper is nice, but I can do better. And that's okay. How can you do better? Is there something that you can do beyond what others have done? Do you have a different way of looking at the problem? So maybe you have a problem that exists in Nigeria and maybe exists in the US, but the solution in the US is not going to work for Nigeria. So you want to think about what is the context-specific solution that you want to develop and how is it different from what already exists. And again, that goes to the last point. What is a potential solution that you're thinking of? It's always worth exploring. You don't know, it might actually work. So I'm going to go through some examples of research questions based on my own work. This is a study that we published in 2023, and it focused on the association of neighborhood, racial, and ethnic composition and historical redlining with built environment indicators derived from street view images in the US. It's a very long title. But basically the idea that we were trying to approach for this particular research was there is a historical policy in the US that was very racist and has had a lot of impact in who has access to what in the country. And so we wanted to look at whether that policy continues to have impact today by looking at different neighborhoods and the compositions of those neighborhoods and what resources people have access to. And we wanted to do this using Google Street View images. So we had images of different neighborhoods that had been collected, millions of images. We wanted to use AI to process those images. I actually had a colleague who was collecting the images and processing them. And we wanted to extract specific indicators, so things like the quality of houses in the neighborhood, whether there were parks in the neighborhood, whether there were trees in the neighborhood. So these are all things that impact health. So we wanted to look at all of those different things and their relationship to one another. So this is a research question that we came up with. What is the association of built environment indicators derived from online street level images with racial and ethnic composition of neighborhoods? Your research question is not always going to be perfect the first time you work on it, and you might have to refine this over time. Maybe the first time you write a research question, it might be very broad, but as you work on the topic, you realize that you can refine it and make it a lot more specific. Because at the end of the day, you want something that's very specific, that solves a very specific problem. So this is a research question we came up with. What do you think makes this a good research question? Any thoughts? This is going to be a very interactive session, so I hope you are ready. Any thoughts? There are no wrong or right answers. I mean, no wrong answers, just some right answers. Any thoughts on what makes this a good research question? It's specific, yes. That's a good answer. Time bound, yes, that's also a very good answer. Do we have a mic that we could maybe pass around so people can share? Yeah, it solves a very specific problem.
Hello? Yeah, the question seems to be a good one because it takes into account the subject that is being addressed by the title of the research.
Great. All right, thank you all for those answers. Here's some thoughts that I put down. So we have the relationship that we're investigating in the study, association between things. We mentioned the variables that we're focusing on. We also mentioned the data source, and it's specific in the focus, as a lot of people have already mentioned. So let's do another example. So this is also a similar study, but this one we did in 2018. So we wanted to use deep learning. How many of you know what deep learning is? Great, a few people in the crowd. So for those of you who don't know, you're going to learn over the next few days. So we use deep learning, which is an AI approach, to examine the association of the built environment with prevalence of neighborhood adult obesity. So similar to the other study, we looked at the images, but instead of images of streets, we looked at satellite imageries. So we collected satellite imageries of neighborhoods. I think we had like 150-something thousand of them. And we processed those images using AI to extract specific features about those neighborhoods and see whether those features could predict obesity prevalence in those neighborhoods. And the specific idea here was that there's been a lot of studies that have shown relationship between what exists in a neighborhood and health outcomes. So your health is not just determined by whether you go to a hospital or not. It's usually determined a lot earlier before you even get sick and go to a hospital. So things like green space, so the presence of trees can impact your health outcomes. Whether you have good housing, that also impacts your health. Education, your level of education. So there are all these different factors that impact your health. But these particular studies, we're looking at what is available in the neighborhood. So what do people have access to? And can we extract that information from images and look at how it's associated with different health indicators? So this is a question that we have for this particular study. How can convolutional neural networks assist in the study of the association between the built environment and obesity prevalence? Any thoughts on this one? What makes this a good question?
Just like with the first question, the variables are clear. They're trying to find the relationship between built environment and obesity prevalence.
Great, thank you. I think there was another hand over here to the right or left.
I think it mentions a specific problem and how it wants to be addressed. So there is a tool, which is a neural networks, and there's a problem, which is obesity prevalence. And since that's...
Great. There's another hand over here.
Okay, what else I've noticed is that what we want to address is specific and focused. We want to address the obesity prevalence. So we have a target, we have what we are focused on addressing.
Great. Let's take one more.
The convolutional neural networks serve as the intervention in studying the relationship between the two variables.
Yeah, another way to think of it is we were coming at this with thinking about AI as a tool. How can AI be useful in this particular context? Okay, there's one, and I think there was one back there.
The convolutional neural network can help in generating the specific items from the images so as to use in the study of the obesity.
So yeah, some of the things that I wrote down, so specific method, potential for impact, which I think someone else said that in another way, and the relationship being investigated. So great. Let's move on to how to conduct research. How do you even go about doing research? Typically, this is a standard scientific process. So you start with a research question, you state a hypothesis, and then you test your hypothesis. So we'll have the research question that we came up with, and then we say, in this particular case, we can say, we think that convolutional neural networks can definitely assist in studying obesity in neighborhoods in the US, and then we test whether that's actually true. So when you're working on research, one of the first things you want to do is read. You cannot do research without reading what other people have done. And you want to read extensively. But when you read, it's very important to question what you're reading. Instead of just accepting whatever has been published, read it and question. People question my studies all the time, and sometimes I have meetings with other people who come specifically to tell me how wrong my studies are. And it's usually very useful to get critique, and then you think about how you can do better. They're not always right, but it's useful. to hear what other people think. So you want to ask questions like, what assumptions are the authors making about in this particular study? You can make assumptions about the data, you can make assumptions in the methods, but you want to identify what are the types of assumptions that people are making. Are the results generalizable? So if you've conducted a study, can you apply it beyond the particular population that you've studied? Are the methods unbiased? Or are there specific biases in the methods that you should care about? So other questions that you could ask is, what could happen if the proposed solution was implemented? So if you took that study, let's say this is the AI study that we did, and we developed a tool that now predicts obesity in different neighborhoods in the US, and the tool is available online for anyone to use, what could happen? What are the potential impacts of having such a tool? Could it be used in a way that could impact certain groups negatively? Let's think about insurance companies, for example. Could an insurance company choose to use that tool in a way that would prevent people from having insurance because they've predicted that these people are more likely to have obesity and other health conditions associated with that? Is there another way of approaching the question or problem? So it's great that someone has done analysis and published a paper, but is there another way that you could approach the same problem? So this requires you to think creatively. And is the data representative of the population? So is everyone being captured? So if the study says we're studying people who were living in Lagos, does it capture the entire population of Lagos, or does it only capture a specific subset of individuals in Lagos? So these are the kinds of questions that you should be asking as you read studies. So what are some topics or research questions that you're currently exploring or you're interested in exploring? I would like to hear from people. Anyone can share.
I'm interested in farm diseases, how to research about it, and how to provide solutions to it. Thank you.
What kind of diseases, you said?
General pest diseases.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Relevance of AI in the embedded system and IoT.
That's a big topic. Do you have a specific focus area, or are you still thinking about it?
Relevance of AI in the smart home.
Okay. A lot more specific. Other topics?
Comparison of traditional ML models and transformer-based models in classifying patients' conditions based on drug reviews.
Great.
Yeah, I'm looking at researching on how to apply AI into energy demand system.
Okay, using AI model to predict for Bitcoin users for futures trading.
Nice.
Using AI and machine learning to improve process optimization in chemical industries.
Application of and of data learning on cancer, early detection of cancer, whether breast or lung cancer.
And we can take one more. There's one over here.
Improving energy yield using machine learning.
Okay.
The adoption of user-centric approaches in designing health information exchange systems.
Are you already working on that topic? It sounds like something you're already doing. Okay.
Implementation of machine learning in the energy sector, especially in CO2 emission.
I'm looking at smart agriculture using Internet of Things.
Okay. I hope you're paying attention to one another, because some of these topics you might have opportunities to collaborate and do something wonderful.
Okay. Using AI to design a tool help people with visual environments to navigate to the environment.
Prediction of climate change in sub-Saharan Africa.
Wow.
Effective and cheap removal of greenhouse gases from local communities in the southeast Nigeria.
So you're looking at methods to make for effective removal?
Method for effective removal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's have one woman.
Okay. Application of machine learning and AI to assist differently abled students
of Wesley University in Ondo Town.
All right, thank you. A topic I'm working on presently, enhanced enabled-based cervical cancer disease using bat nature-inspired swarm optimization algorithm.
That also sounds very specific. All right, I think we can move on. There will be other opportunities to talk throughout this. So let's go through some tips for writing a good scientific paper. So the first tip is that you want to be clear. The purpose of writing is to communicate. So you want people, when they read whatever you've written, to understand. So you're not writing because you want to impress people. Right? I have seen papers where people use a lot of big words that I don't even understand, and I have to pick up dictionaries to look at. That doesn't help you. So when you write, you want to write in simple English and write such that the person who is reading it can understand you. So avoid complicated sentences, avoid using jargon unless it is absolutely necessary. So if you're publishing a paper in your field, in a journal in your field, and you know people will understand those words, then go ahead and use jargon. But otherwise, if you're writing for a general audience, don't use jargon, or if you use jargon, make sure you define it. Make sure your work is impartial, so avoid assumptions. Don't assume that everyone understands whatever you're writing, or don't make general statements like, everyone knows, or this happens all the time. So be very specific and make sure that whatever you're writing, whatever your conclusions are, they're supported by evidence that you've generated in your work. Make sure that your work is structured logically. So order your text in a way that people can follow, and use subheadings. So if you've done things in chunks, maybe you have a specific method that you use for your analysis, or maybe you have to pre-process your data and then you go to your analysis. You can break that into different subsections and use subheadings for those. Also make sure your writing is accurate. So you want to avoid imprecise language such as around, roughly, nearly. Just state, so if you measured something and it's 3.5, say 3.5. And show how your conclusions were inferred. And so if you have very specific conclusions, show how you arrived at those conclusions. Don't assume that the reader is just going to know from reading your paper. Show them how you got to those conclusions, and mention others' work. So there's nothing bad in citing other people. There's nothing bad in having a long list of citations in your papers. So if you've used another person's idea or you've learned from someone else, give them the credit. So let's go now into writing the different sections of a research paper. We're going to start with the introduction. So the introduction aims to present the research question in the context of what is known about the topic. So you want to state what you are studying, but you also want to state what has been done about that topic. So in order to do this, you have to do a literature review. You have to look at what other people have done, and then summarize it, and then state why you're doing what you're doing. So your introduction should be purposeful. So you should state why you're writing the paper. Why should people care about this paper? You should have a scope, so there's a clear understanding of the objectives that you're trying to accomplish for this particular study. And I'm sorry, that seemed to be messed up a little bit. But you want to provide enough background information such that the person reading your paper does not have to go somewhere else to find that information. So here's some guidelines. You want to make sure your problem is clearly stated. You want to review relevant publications, as I mentioned before. So you want to do a literature review that you will summarize in your introduction. So your literature review doesn't have to be, 5 pages long. Usually your introduction for most journals is going to be about a page long. So you want to summarize everything you've done in your literature review to about 3 paragraphs maybe. You want to state the major contribution of the paper and how it differs from previously published studies. So what is a new thing that you're bringing into the field? And some journals will ask you to state the major results, not all of them. Most of the journals in my field do not ask for that, but there are some journals that would say, state what your major results are at the end of your introduction section. So let's go back to the example that we talked about before, and now we're going to look at the introduction and how it's structured. So I'll just give you a few minutes to read through this. So this is the first paragraph in the paper. So after the readers read the abstract and they say, okay, I want to learn more about the paper, this is the first thing that they're going to read. So what do you notice in this paragraph?
Okay, from the introduction, we can see that it is accurate. Like, there are no roughly, nearly, the values are accurate.
Thank you.
There are also a lot of references.
Yeah, so we did a lot of literature review. We looked at a lot of papers and summarized them.
Yes, and it clearly states the problem the research is trying to solve or is solving.
Great, yes. So we started by stating the problem globally, which is a very good way to write in a scientific paper. So you can start by stating, it doesn't have to be global, but what is the big problem that you're trying to address, and then go to the specific. It helps the reader to understand. So you can start with, in this case, we started with a global problem, and then we went to the US, and then we went to US states, and then talked about how obesity has been studied and what are the different factors that have been linked to obesity. So this is the second paragraph. Again, I'm going to give you a few minutes to read, and then you can tell me what you see.
Okay. Good morning. I see it shows how the researcher has received feedback from other papers. So it's not just his feedback. He's done his work by looking through other researchers, and this is his feedback on that.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning. So this paragraph talks about how obesity is related to physical activity, and then also shows from previous research that physical activity is also related to physical structures, like structures that, like recreational facilities and the likes. So it's relating it, providing a base or background knowledge for what the research is about to carry out.
We have a few other thoughts.
It basically emphasizes various factors in the built environment that have a relationship with obesity or the level of health of people in the environment.
It's all about the statement of the problem.
One thing that I would like you to note is, I think this was already mentioned. We can come to you next. I think this was already mentioned, but you can see like the number of references we have from 8 to 26. So we read a lot of papers and we condensed all of those papers in a few sentences. So you can read a lot of things, but you want to highlight what are the most important things in those different studies.
It just gives a brief summary of the factors that causes obesity, and he explains that it particularly comes from urban areas.
Great. Let's take one more and then we move on.
Okay, I also noticed that the papers that we studied are actually relevant to the study. It was not a generic, we just go online and just study something generically. So they were actually relevant to the study.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's another very important point. So once you have your research question, you want to look at studies that have been done in relation to your research question. And those are the studies that you want to summarize and cite. And you don't have to cite everything you read. You might read a paper and decide, this paper is not good enough, does not meet my criteria for citation, and you can exclude that paper from your reference list. All right, let's also review this and discuss.
Okay, I observed the research gap between what was done and where the author wants to come in to filling the gap.
Yes. That's a great observation. And also notice that this paragraph starts with the word despite. So it's saying, despite everything we've discussed in the last paragraph, there are still gaps that this research can fill. Any other thoughts?
From this, we actually observed that several literatures had been reviewed, and there are other shortcomings that were there. So the writer was actually trying to address that.
Great. So in the interest of time, let's move on to the last paragraph in this section.
Yeah, this last paragraph is talking about the main contribution of the article. What the article is trying to contribute to the research gap that was discovered earlier.
Any other thoughts?
Furthermore, they are emphasizing why they are choosing this topic by saying, however, this study did not take full advantage, so they are critiquing other people and justify why they are coming in.
Yes, that's a great point. And the interesting thing is, we were doing these studies. The other study got published before our study, but we were working on the studies at the same time. So when their paper got published, we knew we had to acknowledge their paper and then say, despite the fact that we're doing very similar stuff, we are contributing something new. Any other comments before we move on?
The previous paragraph is like a precursor to this, obviously. So it's trying to solve a problem of inconsistencies that the other methodologies have not solved.
Great. So I hope you all notice that the paragraphs build on each other. They're not starting on their own. So you start with a larger problem. You talk about the literature review. You talk about what is the gap in that space and how you're filling that gap. And you don't have to follow these, you don't have to follow the specific steps, like you don't have to have 4 paragraphs all the time, but you can think about how to present information in a similar way. So how to write the methods and materials section. So different fields refer to these differently. So for some fields, it's just methods. Other fields, you have methods and materials. And the purpose is to present enough information that others can reproduce your analyses or experiments. So you want to focus on these 2 things, reproducibility and replicability. So reproducibility means that original data is used to generate the same results. So if you've done your analysis and someone else comes and takes your data, they should be able to produce exact same results that you've observed. If they can't, then there's a problem. The other one is replicability, which is basically that you have new data that's been collected and the goal is to produce similar findings. So they can use similar methods, but they have new data, and so their results are not going to be exactly the same, but the findings will be similar to yours. So when you're writing about your materials, you want to be precise. We've already talked about this, but be as precise as possible. If you have numbers, state what your numbers are. Don't say about or approximately. If it's 300, say 300. You want to identify your population and the type of data that is being used in your study. So if you're studying women, say you're studying women, state exactly if you have demographics about their age, write their age, the location where they're based, and so forth. If you're working with human subjects, you want to describe how you went about selecting who to include in the study and whether you actually had informed consent, which basically means did you inform them that you were going to use their data and did they agree to having their data being used in your study. And you also want to include a statement and institutional review board approval, so make sure that your study was actually approved. Methods, you want to present your methods in a chronological fashion. So what did you do first? What did you do second? What did you do third? What did you do fourth? Research can be messy. So sometimes you might do, your initial set of analysis, but it doesn't work out, so you have to go back and redo things. When you're writing your paper, you don't have to write all of that unless you think it's absolutely necessary. You just need to tell the reader, this is the first thing that you're supposed to do, this is the second thing that you're supposed to do, the third thing, and so forth. As I mentioned before, use subheadings, especially in the methods. This is very important because you've done a lot of different steps. So when you use subheadings, it helps your reader to follow what did you do first, what did you do second, what did you do third, and so forth. And be precise. I keep repeating that, but be precise. So why did you use the methods that you use in your study? This is something that you want to state. It's not always necessary, so if you use a method that is widely used in your field, then you don't have to explain that. But if you're using a new method, explain why you're using the new method. Do not overemphasize widely used statistical methods, so if you're using something like a t-test and ANOVA, you don't need to emphasize that a lot. add references and additional details in your method section so that when your readers read it, they can go back to the original methods. We can quickly go through this example. So this is the first paragraph from a materials and methods section in the paper. So what do you observe in this paragraph?
So from the paragraph, we could see they introduced one of their data sources, Yelp, stated why it is a good source for the research that is being conducted, and what exactly they used Yelp for.
Great.
All right, I observed that the citation style is different from that of the previous.
That's a good observation. So different journals have different citation styles. So when you're writing your paper, you want to check with the journal to see what your citation style is, so you're using the correct style.
Okay. From my observation, I think the data, they are being precised enough, stating how many distances were used.
Great.
Okay. From this paragraph, you can get to know that there is citations. That's where the data has been given, and also percentage has been in the slides. That's to show there is some percentage of social things that has been gotten.
Great. All right, let's move on. This is the second paragraph in that section, and I want you to note, first of all, that this has a subheading and then another subheading. So this section is called analysis, and then you have keyword matching as another subheading. Any thoughts on this?
Okay, I noted a few things. The word we, probably it was a group work, and then they said they constructed a keyword list based on a list of, it's chronological, started with something, and then it built up to the last for further analysis.
Great.
I think it's showing some elements of NLP in it. So that's what I observe.
Elements of what?
NLP, natural language processing.
Yes, okay. Let's take one more from the front.
So the material used was a list of foodborne diseases from CDC. So it was just to construct the keyword list.
And another thing I want you to note is that we reference tables. So we say table A.2, table A.5. So tables and visualizations are a great way for you to summarize information. So if you have a lot of information, you can put them in tables, you can create figures, and you don't have to repeat the information that you have in those tables. You just have to highlight the most important thing that you want the reader to take from that table. So you can say, if you want additional information, look at table A.5, for example. So what I want you to get from this, similar to that, we have another subheading here. So there's a classification criteria, and these are only one paragraph long sections or subsections. But they summarize specific things that we did so that the reader knows this is what happened, the first thing happened, and then the second thing happened, and so forth. And there's another section, this one focused on bias and cluster analysis. Again, following the exact same steps of the analysis that we did for the paper. All right, this is another example. I think these slides will be available to you, and so you can review them. But let's move on and talk a bit about, let me mention data sharing. Data sharing is a very good way for you to share your data with other people in your field. So if you want people to be able to replicate your findings, you can share your data. Journals encourage data sharing. Not all journals, but some journals encourage data sharing. And the best part is that now we have data journals. So you can publish your data with your original study, or you can publish your data separately. So you then have a data paper that people can cite Or you can put your data in a repository and people can also cite it in the repository. So you get more citation, but you also have more opportunity for people to use your work. So let's talk about the results section. How do you write the results section? I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to mention it again. You want to state your findings clearly and succinctly. Include only results in your results section unless the journal has different requirements. So for some journals, you would have the results will come before the methods. So in that case, you have to describe your methods in the results section. So you don't describe all the methods, but you want to describe enough that the reader understands where the results are coming from. You want to choose what you present. So if you've done lots and lots of experiments, you don't have to write every single one of them. You can use statistics to summarize your findings and only highlight what is important. Consult journal guidelines, always. Journals have different guidelines on how to write papers. You know, it's okay for you to write your first draft in whatever style you want, but before you submit to a journal, go to the journal website, look at the guidelines, and then format your paper according to the guidelines. Your results should be short and sweet. You don't need a lot of excessive information in your results. Just tell people what you found. If you found A, say I found A or B. If you want to talk more about what you found, that goes into your discussion section. But again, this can differ for some journals. So some journals have the results and the discussion together. And so then you might have to see a little bit more. Check the journal guidelines before you submit. Use statistics to create summaries, and know that your whole paper stands or falls based on the results. The results are the new contribution to your field. The rest of the paper is wonderful, but if you have nothing useful to present in your results section, then your paper is useless. So think about your results. You've done the work, you've done the analysis. How do you present your results in a way that it accurately captures what you found in your analysis? So let's go through some examples. This one is focused on forecasting influenza-like illness trends in Cameroon using Google search data. So this is the first paragraph of the results. If you can please read and tell me what you observe.
Okay, the results were stated clearly using statistics.
Okay, that's a good observation. There's another hand right there.
Okay, the result did not include any other citation source. Let's say it was just specifically what you found.
That's a great observation, yes. So there are no citations, it's just observations. Another hand over here.
The result also shows some figures that the reader can also check to confirm the statistics there.
Great.
Okay. The results shows the results to represent. You only mentioned the two regions with the highest number of reported cases, and we don't know the number of regions there, but it picked the two highest that were like most important.
Yeah, so one thing that you can do in your results section is you can start the first paragraph by basically summarizing your data. So you're telling the reader, yes, what my data is about before you even go into your analysis. There's a hand over there. It's been up for a while.
Knowing that 100% perfection is not possible, the confidence interval was stated. That confidence interval that was used, 95%, was clearly stated.
Great, yeah. So we use statistics to summarize our data. Here's another paragraph. I don't remember if this was the second paragraph, but this is an example where the results came before the methods. So we had to talk a little bit about the methods. So you can quickly read this and let me know what you observe.
So I remember you said that you should not assume that people understand, what you're writing about. So it started with explaining what kind of results this is out of sample predictions.
Yeah, great. And you don't always have to to specifically state the methods in the way that we state them in this paragraph, if you have the methods come before the results, and then you can just use subheadings to match what you did in the different sections. So if you have a subheading in the method section, you can repeat the same subheading in the results section, then the reader knows that analysis produces results.
The table there is referring the people to it so that they can quickly cross-check. Then secondly, those mean and the highest percentage also justify or explain further your result, your finding.
Great.
All right, so just as she said, the descriptive statistics were also involved to explain the data.
Thank you. And the other thing I want to mention is we use supplementary material, so what I refer to here as SI, Table 1. So if you have additional information beyond what the journal allows you to put in the paper, you can create an extra file that only contains that additional information, and you can publish that along with your paper. And for readers who are interested in learning more, they can go to the supplementary information. So let's quickly look at another example. So this one focused on COVID-19 misinformation in 8 countries, and we use an exponential growth modeling approach. Basically, we're trying to see if misinformation spread similarly to how an epidemic would spread. So this is the first paragraph in the results section.
So one thing I noticed about the report is that it is arranged in a chronological order. We started with the results of searches online in February, then we progress from January, then we progress to February, and then to March. So it's in the chronological order.
That's a great observation, even though I don't think that was intentional, but yeah, that's a good observation. Any other thoughts?
I've also discovered that the table and figure labels, sometimes you abbreviate the figures and then the table are not abbreviated, you spell them out in full.
Yeah, another great point. And these are all based on journal requirements. So if the journal wants you to spell it out, you spell it out, while other journals will ask you to abbreviate.
Another point from there is that you started with talking about the general or the overall trend of the thing, and give specific examples with time.
Yeah, so we mentioned what was happening across all the 6 countries, and then we say, for example, to specifically highlight the points that we want the reader to remember. And this is the figure. It's not the best figure in the world, but the main point is that it captures a lot of information, and if the reader wants to see what we were trying to highlight specifically was that this is how an epidemic will usually spread. So when you have a disease epidemic, it starts and people get infected, and then it goes up, it peaks, and then it dies out from the population. And it's a very similar observation that we made with misinformation in this case. We've already talked a lot about this. So your data can be presented in tables and figures. And when you do that, you just want to make sure you have captions so your reader knows what the table and the figures are about. You want to reference each table and figure in the text. So if you've created a table or a figure and it's somewhere in your paper, it has to be mentioned in the text so that people can link back to it. Highlight patterns or lack of patterns in your data. So instead of talking about everything that you have in the table or everything you have in the figure, just highlight the major things that you want the reader to remember. These are just on visualizations. I just wanted to mention a few things. So when you're plotting continuous data, use line graphs. You use bar graphs when you're plotting categorical data. Use error bars to capture uncertainty or variations in your data. And if you want to learn more about data visualizations, there are lots of resources online. I've also taught data visualization at Data Science Africa, and I think those slides are available online as well for anyone who's interested. So let's just go over this really quickly. Which visualization is more informative? People pointing. Can you get the mic and speak, please?
The second one.
Why?
Yeah, we have all the specification and data specified on it. Like we have 77%, we have 51%. Why the second one is just showing the color and the number that each color is representing.
Okay, yeah, that's good. What about this one? Which plot type is appropriate?
The bar chart.
The bar chart.
To the right, to
Why?
the left.
Why?
It gives a good representation of what you're trying to explain. Because you're trying to see the population of fish. The bar chart, the length of the bar gives the exact number of the population of fish. But here, it's more of like a trend, like a pattern. So the one to the left gives the accurate representation of the population.
Okay, I'm looking for a word. Can someone give me that word?
The population is, the animals is a categorical.
Thank you, categorical.
Data. So,
Thank you. So we want to use line graphs when we're dealing with continuous data. All right, so let's go through the discussion and conclusion sections. So usually the discussion is the most difficult section to write because it's not very clearly defined. But I'm going to give you a few points that I hope will be useful to you as you write your discussion sections. So first of all, don't be shy. You want to discuss the significance of your work. You've done a lot of analysis, you've done literature review, you've done so much. Tell us why your work is important. Talk about it. Discuss your major findings. So you can start off by saying, this is what we observed and this is why it's important. And then you want to point out exceptions in your study. So if you have findings that do not align with what other people have found, tell us. Tell us why they don't align. And you don't always have to have all of the answers. You can say it doesn't align and here are possible reasons, but we need additional studies to confirm that. Show how your results agree or disagree with previous studies. So your conclusion section is basically what usually comes after your discussion. So you want to state exactly what you're concluding from all the work you've done. So state your conclusions clearly and provide evidence to support each conclusion. So you don't want to come up with things that have nothing to do with your study. Make sure that whatever you're writing in your conclusion aligns with what you found. Check journal guidelines to see if the conclusion is included with the discussion or if it's a separate section. Because sometimes journals don't actually have a conclusion section. You need to have one. So you can have a paragraph, but maybe you don't label it as a conclusion, or you might need to label it if the journal allows that. Let's just quickly go through this example. So if you can read and let me know what you think. We have a hand in the front.
The discussion started with mentioning the aim of the paper.
Great.
All right, so I noticed a few things, just like what he said. He started by saying why we conducted the research, and then told us the timeline from when we started to, work on the research from 2015 to 2020. Now proceeded to giving a generic view of what we discovered during the research, and then provided something like a clause. Despite seeing this is what we now went on to provide and all of that. So it's more of a chronological presentation of the summary.
Great. I think you've highlighted the main points, which is you want to tell the reader why you did this work, what are your main findings, and then discuss why those findings are important. So this is an example where we have the discussion and then the conclusion coming right after. So the conclusion is basically what is highlighted in green. Before we end, let me just mention the limitations section and why that's important. So this usually comes in as part of the discussion, and is not always required in all fields, but in our field in public health is extremely important because the work you do affects people's lives. And so we have to talk about why basically, what are the limitations in what we've done? Where are places where what we've done cannot be applied? What are some of the assumptions we made about the data and the methods? So in the limitation section, you basically want to reduce incorrect assumptions. So you don't want people reading your paper and assuming that, for example, it applies to everyone. So you say, this is where my study does not apply based on the data or the methods that I use. You also want to list potential improvements for future studies, so you don't have to know everything. If there's something you don't know and you think you want to study in the future, or you think other people should study in the future, this is a good place to list it. And it also helps your reader to understand exactly what your assumptions are, and ensure that you understand what your assumptions are. We're going to skip this in the interest of time and take questions.
Hi. So my question is on the data collection process. So I noticed that what you have seen so far is the secondary data, right? So talking about the primary data now, what are the factors to consider when sourcing for your own data or something like that?
What kind of data do you want to collect? Is it from people? Is it from animals?
Yes, from people, humans, right? Are there some factors to have in mind when going into the field to collect the data? Are there some things to consider, right?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know, yeah.
So
Thank you.
that's a very long discussion. There's a lot that has been written about how to do research with humans, but basically you have to think about the ethical aspects of it. Who are you collecting data from? Do they understand that you're collecting your data and how you're going to use your data? How do they benefit from your research? So it's not just about you taking from them, but how do you give back to them? So these are all things that you have to think about. But I can definitely provide more information. Just send me an email and I can send you more on that. There was a hand here earlier.
I have a question. You were talking about reading lots of research paper, and I think that's a problem because I saw like in the introduction you quoted about 40 research papers. So as an individual trying to research, how can I effectively study like 40 research papers? That's my question.
How can you do it? Or what do you mean by how?
Because like some research papers can be very long, like 20 pages, or you can even read like a thesis to get to your information. So my question was, how can you effectively study research papers like to save time? I think that's the main thing.
Yeah. I think you make it as a practice. So you're going to do, if you're working on a research topic, it's not going to take you 2 months to do all the entire study. This might take you a year or even longer. So you have enough time to read 40 research papers in a year. Right? And you can come up with ways of collecting and extracting information from research papers. But basically, you just have to read. And I think Dr. Bayo has some tips on how you can read.
All right. Thank you so much. I must admit that the presentation has been fantastic and nice. And I really want to ask, you mentioned that you have to cite papers that that will meet a certain, let's say, your own personal citation criteria, all right? There is a standard that you have, so you can probably cite a particular paper. Okay, what if maybe you submitted an article in a particular journal and then maybe you've received about 3 or 4 rejections and then now submitted to a particular, let's say, Q1 or Q2. And then after, let's say, 8 to 9 months of going through the review process, and then the 4th reviewer now reaches out to you and now said, okay, you have to cite this particular article, and then if that particular article does not meet your own citation criteria, what will you do? Will you go ahead to cite it and then get the paper published or turn it down?
That's a very good question. personally, I would write back and say, here's a reason why we didn't cite this paper. Here's why it doesn't fit into our specific study, how it doesn't meet the criteria that we set. But then I would also say that we're open to hearing what the editor has to say. Like if they have other suggestions or if they think our criteria is incorrect, we're open to hearing that as well.
Yeah, I just want to add to the conversation around number of papers to read. You're worried about reading 40 papers. Is Faith here? There's a team doing oh, Stevie, you are here. There's a simple project we're doing in our organization, and the team is working. How many papers are you reading? Stevie, you are here. How many? 200. And when are you presenting your report? 30th of October, they present, and they are reading 200 papers. You know, there's a proverb in Democratic Republic of Congo. It says that you learn to cut a tree by cutting a tree. If you want to do a research, the principle of research is that you are standing on the shoulders of others. You cannot make a claim that you cannot establish on extant knowledge. So it is critical that you know that it is inevitable. Please, can you tell our friends that it's inevitable? But because we are Gen Z, they've now created tools for us that can help us to quickly summarize a paper. You know, even though serious researcher would rather want to read from page 1 to page 50, but I think there are tools today that can extract, especially when you have a clear inclusion and exclusion rules, if the research asks what you are looking for, so that you will not need to go through all the details. But I also think there's a secret where if you read the abstract, you read the conclusion, you may likely know whether the paper is relevant to what you want to do or not, so that you don't waste your time chasing shadows. But like I said, the only way you learn to cut a tree is to cut a tree. You got to read. You got to read. Thank you very much.
So we're out of time, but I'm going to be around during the break if you have more questions. Thank you.
Oh, hello. Okay. Please, can I ask this question before you leave? Hello. Sorry. Sorry, please. It's very, very important. Please, sorry for taking your time.
Is it possible for you to ask her in person? She'll be around for the break as well. Okay, thank you. Please, can we celebrate Dr. Elaine? Thank you so much. Okay, I think this is a good time to go for the unveiling. Dr. Bayo will be coming up with Dr. Elaine. So please, let's celebrate them again.
Yeah. Great. Dr. Elaine, as you may know, she is an assistant professor at Boston University, Massachusetts. For many years, she's been committing her time to building future Africans. Interestingly, we met on the field, many years ago in our quest to continue to build talent. I can say she's one of the most traveled African researchers in data science based in the US, coming to Africa all the time. Whether it's Ghana, Sierra Leone, the last time you were in Tanzania as well, she goes around helping young Africans to learn how to write good research paper. And she's very intentional about it. Very intentional about it. And she's built a platform that mentors young researchers to write great research work. And in the last 1 week, she arrived in Nigeria last week. She's been recording contents. So everything she spoke about today, how many? 13 videos? Yeah, 13 videos that further simplifies and explains everything. And this will be unveiled in the next few weeks. So this she did in Lagos for 1 week. This is what I was talking about. Not all this faffing around that has no depth. This is what we call depth. works that you do that outlive time, works that build the next generation, works that are intentional, that are rigorous. That's what she does, and that's why she's a fantastic friend of Data Science Nigeria. And she's also one of our advisory board members. Please, can you give her another round of applause? On that note, we are proud to, can somebody help to put this in the center? And I'm going to invite, do we have PhD researchers in the room? You are currently writing your PhD. Can I see your hand? Wave. 1, 2, 3. So please, can you join us on the podium? So we're going to put it at the center, and then we take a picture to formally unveil this. Okay. No, I think this will be better. We can, or do we think this is sufficient? Because screen can affect photography. Yes, this can actually affect photography. Yes. Yes. So let's welcome these PhD researchers. Please, can you clap for them? PhD, no biyamo. Or do we have anyone who has finished PhD? You finished PhD. Oh, she has finished already. Oh, we actually have someone who has finished PhD. Please, can you clap for her, please? Finished? Wow. We have more people who have finished PhD to join Dr. Elaine to take this unveiling, to celebrate this commitment that she has made to supporting Africa. Oh, you are welcome, ma. I didn't know you were around. Good to see you, ma. Please, can you give her a wonderful round of applause? Okay. This is a token of recognition of an intentional work from Africa back to Africa. She's a Cameroonian based in the US, but genuinely committed to developing talent. And it's on that basis that we unveil this work as a platform to raise more researchers from Africa who will do world-class work that will change the narrative of the continent. And you can visit, it has a website. Do you want to talk about the website and the links? It's not up yet, okay? But at least you can see all the details on the screen. Google for it and make sure that you meet her during the break to know more how this platform can support your research work. Please, can we give her another round of applause? And thanks for everyone who joined us on the podium. Please, can we clap for our PhD researchers? If you want to have a PhD tomorrow, clap for those who have it today. Please, can we clap for Dr. Elaine as she goes back to her seat?